The rain hammered against the windows of my modest two-story home in southeast Portland that October evening. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing dinner: roasted chicken with herbs from my small garden, mashed potatoes the way my daughter Jolene used to love them as a child, and an apple pie cooling on the counter. The house smelled of cinnamon and rosemary, scents that had always meant family to me. I was 72 years old, and my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Arthritis had settled into my knuckles years ago, making even simple tasks like peeling potatoes a challenge. But I didn't mind. Jolene was coming to dinner with her husband, Garrett, and any discomfort was worth seeing my daughter's face. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. I wiped my hands on my apron and hurried to answer it, my heart lifting with anticipation. When I opened the door, Jolene stood there in an expensive black coat I'd never seen before, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Garrett loomed behind her, his face already set in that expression of impatience I'd come to recognize over the 5 years they'd been married. "Hi, Mom," Jolene said, brushing past me without a hug. The cold air followed them inside. "Sweetheart, I'm so glad you're here," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away, already heading toward the dining room. Garrett gave me a curt nod, his eyes scanning my home with barely concealed disdain. I'd noticed this look before, the way he seemed to catalog everything that was old or worn, the faded wallpaper I couldn't afford to replace, the sagging couch I'd had since Jolene was a teenager, the photographs in mismatched frames covering the mantel. I followed them into the dining room, where I'd set the table with my best dishes, the ones my mother had given me when I got married 49 years ago. The china was delicate, hand-painted with tiny blue flowers, and I only used it for special occasions. "Dinner smells good," Jolene said, but her voice was flat, distracted. She was looking at her phone, her fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "I made your favorite," I said, bringing in the platter of chicken. "Do you remember how you used to beg me to make this every Sunday?" She barely glanced up. "That was a long time ago, Mom." Something in her tone made me pause, but I pushed the feeling aside. I wanted this evening to be perfect. We sat down, and I served them both, my hands trembling slightly as I spooned potatoes onto their plates. Garrett watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So," I began, trying to start a conversation, "how's the new house? You haven't invited me over yet, and I'd love to see it." Jolene and Garrett had moved into a sprawling home in the West Hills 6 months ago. I'd only seen pictures on social media, glimpses of marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. Garrett cut into his chicken with sharp, precise movements. "It's fine. We've been busy with renovations. Maybe I could help," I offered. "I'm good with painting, and I have some free time." "We hired professionals, Judith," Jolene interrupted. She finally put her phone down, but her eyes were cold. "We don't need help." The words stung, but I smiled anyway. "Of course. I just thought it might be nice to spend time together." We ate in silence for several minutes. I tried to think of something to say, some way to bridge the distance that seemed to grow wider between us every time we met. When had my daughter become this stranger sitting across from me? "The chicken is dry," Garrett said suddenly, pushing his plate away. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I can make something else." "Don't bother." He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Actually, Judith, there's something we need to discuss." My stomach tightened. The way he said my name, with such casual dismissal, made me feel small. "What is it?" Jolene finally met my eyes. "We need money, Mom." "Money?" I repeated. "I don't understand. You both have good jobs." "The house cost more than we expected," Jolene said. "The renovations went over budget. We need $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000? Sweetheart, I don't have that kind of money. You know I live on my pension and Social Security. After your father died." "Don't talk about Dad," Jolene snapped. Her face had gone red. "Don't you dare use him as an excuse." I sat back, shocked by the venom in her voice. "I'm not making excuses. I'm just explaining that I can't or won't," Garrett interrupted. He leaned forward, his elbows on my grandmother's china. "We know you have assets, Judith. This house alone is worth at least $400,000 in this market." My heart began to pound. "This is my home. I've lived here for 43 years. Your father and I raised Jolene here. It's just a house," Garrett said coldly. "You're one person. You don't need all this space." You could sell it, move into a retirement community, and give us the money. You'd still have plenty left over. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to say something, to tell him he was wrong. But Jolene just sat there, her jaw set, her eyes hard. I can't sell my home, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is where all my memories are, where I raised you, Jolene. Where your father— Stop living in the past, Jolene shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The china rattled. We need this money now. We've worked hard for everything we have, and you're sitting here in this old house being selfish. Tears pricked my eyes. I've given you everything I could your whole life. I put you through college. I helped with your wedding. I gave you $10,000 just last year when you said you needed it for a down payment. 10,000, Garrett scoffed. That's nothing. That's pocket change. We're talking about real money here. I stood up, my legs shaking. I think you both should leave. Leave? Jolene stood too, her face twisted with anger I'd never seen before. But we're trying to include you in our lives. And this is how you repay us, by being cheap and stubborn. I'm not being cheap, I said, my voice breaking. I just don't have what you're asking for. You're useless, Garrett said, standing. He was a tall man, over 6 feet, and he moved around the table toward me. You know that? Completely useless. You sit in this house surrounded by junk, living off government money, and you can't even help your own daughter. Please leave, I said again, backing toward the kitchen, but Garrett kept coming. You're a burden, Judith. A broke, useless burden. Jolene wastes her time visiting you out of obligation, but what do you actually contribute to anyone's life? Stop it, I whispered. You're nothing, he continued, his face inches from mine now. You have nothing to offer. You're just waiting to die in this pathetic house. Get out, I shouted with more force than I knew I had. That's when Jolene grabbed my arm. Don't you raise your voice at him. She pulled me backward, and I stumbled. Garrett's hand shot out, shoving me hard in the chest. I flew backward, my feet leaving the ground for a moment that seemed to last forever. Then I hit the glass door leading to my back patio. The sound of shattering glass filled the room. I felt the impact in every bone, felt something sharp slice across my temple, felt myself sliding down onto the floor amid the broken shards. Rain and cold air rushed in through the broken door. For a moment, there was complete silence except for the rain. I sat there on my kitchen floor, surrounded by broken glass, and lifted my hand to my face. It came away red with blood. I looked up at my daughter and her husband. They stood there, frozen, staring down at me. I waited for horror to cross their faces, for apologies, for Jolene to rush to help me. Instead, Garrett straightened his jacket. Clean yourself up, Judith. You look pathetic. Jolene turned away, grabbing her purse from the counter. When you're ready to be reasonable, call us. Until then, don't bother reaching out. They walked out through my front door, leaving it open behind them. I heard their car start, heard them drive away into the rain-soaked night. I sat there on the floor for a long time, blood running down my face, mixing with tears I couldn't hold back anymore. Broken glass glittered around me like scattered stars. The cold October wind blew through the shattered door, and I realized with perfect clarity that everything had changed. I had spent 50 years of my life being kind, being accommodating, being whatever everyone needed me to be. And this was where it had led, to bleeding alone on my kitchen floor while my only child walked away without a backward glance. Something inside me, something that had bent and bent and bent for decades, finally broke. But unlike the glass around me, when I broke, I didn't shatter into useless pieces. I became sharp. With trembling hands, I pulled myself up using the counter. I found a dish towel and pressed it to my bleeding temple. Then I walked to my bedroom, glass crunching under my shoes, and found the business card I'd kept in my nightstand drawer for 5 years. Malcolm Thorne, attorney at law. He'd handled my husband's estate, and he'd told me then, Judith, if you ever need anything, call me, day or night. It was 9:47 at night, but I picked up my phone and dialed. He answered on the 3rd ring. Judith, is everything all right? No, I said, my voice steady despite the blood and the pain and the broken glass. No, Malcolm, it's not, but it's going to be. What do you need? I looked at my reflection in the darkened window, an old woman with blood on her face and steel in her eyes. I need to protect everything I've built, I said. and I need to make sure no one can take it from me ever again. Can you come over? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and sat down on my bed, still holding the bloody towel to my head. The rain continued to fall. My house was cold with the broken door, but I didn't move to cover it. I was done being warm and welcoming to people who saw kindness as weakness. By morning, I thought, everything would be different. I just didn't know yet how different it would become. Chapter 2. The Lawyer. Malcolm Thorne arrived at my house exactly 19 minutes after our phone call. I heard his car pull up, heard his footsteps hurrying through the rain to my front door, which I'd finally managed to close though the lock was damaged. When I let him in, his eyes widened at the sight of me. I'd cleaned most of the blood from my face, but the gash on my temple was still visible, and bruises were already forming on my arms where Jolene had grabbed me. "Jesus, Judith," he breathed. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. First, we need to talk." Malcolm was in his early 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been my husband Robert's attorney and friend for 30 years. After Robert died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, Malcolm had helped me navigate the legal complexities of widowhood with patience and genuine compassion. He followed me into my kitchen, his expression growing darker as he saw the shattered glass door, the broken china scattered across the floor, the bloodstains on my linoleum. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I told him everything. The dinner, the demand for money, the insults, the violence, Jolene walking away without looking back. Malcolm listened in silence, his jaw clenched. When I finished, he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said. "No." I put my hand on his arm. "Not yet. Judith, this is assault. Possibly attempted murder given your age. They threw you through a glass door." "I know what they did," I interrupted. "I was there. But if we call the police right now, tonight, it becomes a criminal matter. There will be charges, court appearances, testimony. It will destroy what's left of my relationship with my daughter forever." "She destroyed that relationship when she did this to you," Malcolm said gently. I felt tears threatening again, and blinked them back. Maybe, probably, but I need to think clearly, and I can't do that if I'm focused on criminal proceedings right now. What I need from you tonight is protection, legal protection. Malcolm studied my face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Tell me what you want." "Robert left me financially comfortable," I began. "The house is paid off. I have his life insurance, his pension, our savings, some investments. It's not millions in, but it's substantial. Around $800,000 in total assets, including the house." "That's correct," Malcolm confirmed. He had been the executor of Robert's will. "Jolene is my only heir. In my current will, everything goes to her when I die." "Also correct." I took a deep breath. "I want to change that. Tonight. Right now, I want you to draw up a new will that protects my assets from her and from Garrett." Malcolm pulled out a leather portfolio from his briefcase. "I can do that. But Judith, you should know, if you completely disinherit her, she could contest the will. Oregon law doesn't require you to leave anything to adult children, but a sudden change after years of good relations could be challenged." "This wasn't sudden," I said quietly. "Looking back, I can see it's been building for years. The distance, the coldness. I just didn't want to admit it." "When did Garrett enter the picture?" "They met 7 years ago. Got married 5 years ago, right after Robert died." Malcolm's eyebrows rose. "Right after. 3 months after the funeral." I remembered that time, the fog of grief I'd been moving through. I thought it was sudden, but Jolene said they were in love and didn't want to wait. I gave them my blessing because I wanted her to be happy. I even helped pay for the wedding, $30,000. Did Robert ever meet Garrett? "Once, about a month before he died." I closed my eyes, remembering. Robert didn't like him. He told me there was something off about him, something calculating. We argued about it, the only real argument we'd had in years. Robert said he was going to change his will to put conditions on Jolene's inheritance. But then he had the heart attack, and there wasn't time. Malcolm wrote something down in his notes. "What happened to the $30,000 you gave them for the wedding?" "I don't know. The wedding itself was small, maybe $15,000 at most. Jolene never accounted for the rest. When I asked about it, She got angry and said I was being controlling. And the $10,000 you mentioned giving them last year, they said they needed it for a down payment on their house. But then I saw on social media that they'd bought a house in the West Hills for $1.9 million. A $10,000 down payment wouldn't make sense for a house that expensive. Malcolm's expression had gone cold. Judith, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you sign anything? Any documents related to loans, mortgages, power of attorney? My blood ran cold. Last year, when they asked for the $10,000, Garrett had some papers for me to sign. He said it was just paperwork acknowledging the money was a gift, not a loan, for tax purposes. Do you have copies? No. He said he'd send them to me, but he never did. Malcolm's jaw tightened. We need to pull your credit report immediately. Tonight. And I need to access your financial records to make sure nothing's been taken out in your name. You think they might have... I think people who throw a 72-year-old woman through a glass door over money are capable of anything, Malcolm said grimly. He pulled out his laptop. Give me permission to access your accounts. We'll start there. For the next 2 hours, Malcolm worked while I cleaned up broken glass and wrapped ice in a towel for my swelling face. He ran my credit report, checked all my bank accounts, reviewed my investment portfolios. Finally, he looked up, his face pale. What is it? I asked, my stomach dropping. Judith, 3 months ago, someone took out a home equity line of credit on this house for $150,000. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. The signature on the documents is yours, or a very good forgery. He turned the laptop toward me, showing me scanned documents. There was my signature on line after line, authorizing a loan against my house. I stared at the papers, my mind reeling. I never signed these. I would never. This is my home. Those papers Garrett had you sign last year, Malcolm said quietly. I'm willing to bet they weren't what he said they were. He probably slipped the HELOC documents in with the gift acknowledgement. But I read them. Did you read every page? Every word? Or did you skim them because you trusted your daughter's husband? I thought back to that day. Garrett had brought over what looked like 2 or 3 pages of documents. He'd been friendly, reassuring. I'd been in a hurry to get to a doctor's appointment. I had skimmed them, trusted him, signed them quickly. The money, I whispered. Where did it go? Malcolm clicked through more screens. The full amount was withdrawn immediately and transferred to an account I can't access from here. But based on the timing and the amount, I'd guess it went toward their house purchase or renovations. I felt sick. They stole from me. My own daughter helped her husband steal from me. Yes, Malcolm said simply. And based on tonight, when you refused to give them more, they got violent. This is elder financial abuse. Judith, it's a serious crime. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, feeling every one of my 72 years. What do? First, we file a police report. Tonight, this is assault and battery, and likely fraud and forgery. Second, we freeze all your accounts and change all your passwords. Third, we get a restraining order against both of them. Fourth, we sue to void the fraudulent loan and recover your money. And fifth, he paused, his eyes gentle, we make sure this never happens again. The new will, I said. The new will, he confirmed. But Judith, I need you to understand something. Once we set these wheels in motion, there's no going back. Your relationship with Jolene, whatever's left of it, will be over. Permanently. I looked around my kitchen. I saw the place where Robert had made me coffee every morning for 44 years. I saw the growth chart on the doorframe where we'd measured Jolene's height every birthday. I saw the refrigerator covered with old photos, Jolene's first day of school, her high school graduation, her wedding day. In every photo, I saw a daughter I didn't recognize anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing clearly for the first time. She pushed me into a glass door and walked away while I bled, I said softly. She called me useless and broke. She let her husband steal from me and then demanded more. Malcolm, I don't think I have a relationship with her to save anymore. He nodded slowly. Then let's protect you. That's what Robert would have wanted. We spent the next hour drafting a new will. I left my house and a small trust fund to my nephew James, who lived in Seattle and had always been kind to me. I divided the rest of my assets among several charities Robert and I had supported, a women's shelter, an animal rescue, a literacy program. I left Jolene exactly $1, which Malcolm explained would show that I hadn't forgotten her, but had intentionally chosen not to leave her anything more. This way, she can't claim you forgot her or were mentally incompetent, he explained. The $1 shows intentional disinheritance. When we finished, Malcolm printed out the documents and had me sign them. He'd brought 2 witnesses from his office. They'd been waiting in the car, who came in to witness my signature and notarize the will. "It's done," Malcolm said, sealing the documents in an envelope. "Your assets are now protected. Even if something happens to you tomorrow, Jolene and Garrett can't touch them." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted slightly from my chest. "Now," Malcolm said, pulling out his phone again, "we call the police." This time, I didn't stop him. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes. They took photos of my injuries, documented the broken door, and took my statement. They were professional but kind, and the female officer held my hand when I cried, describing how my daughter had left me bleeding. "We'll go pick them up tonight," she said. "Assault on an elderly person is a serious charge in Oregon. They'll be arrested and held until arraignment." After the police left, Malcolm called a service to come board up my broken door. Then he drove me to the emergency room, where I received 12 stitches in my temple and was treated for bruised ribs and a mild concussion. It was 3 a.m. when Malcolm finally drove me home. He walked me inside, made sure all the doors were locked, and handed me his business card. "I've written my cell phone number on the back," he said. "Call me anytime, day or night, for any reason." "You're not alone in this, Judith." After he left, I stood in my empty house, listening to the rain finally tapering off outside. My face throbbed with pain. My body ached. My heart felt like it had been carved out of my chest. But somewhere beneath all that pain, I felt something else. I felt free. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I wasn't bending myself into shapes to please other people. I wasn't swallowing my hurt to keep the peace. I wasn't pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I was protecting myself. I was standing up. I was saying no. It had taken being thrown through a glass door to get here, but I had finally arrived. I went to bed as the sun began to rise, and despite everything, I slept. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. I woke up to my phone ringing. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, and for a moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then I tried to sit up, and pain shot through my ribs. Memory came flooding back. The phone kept ringing. I reached for it on my nightstand, wincing at the movement. Malcolm's name showed on the screen. "Hello?" My voice came out rough, scratchy. "Judith, it's Malcolm. How are you feeling?" "Like I was thrown into a glass door," I said, attempting humor that fell flat. "I need to tell you something," he said, his tone serious. "Jolene and Garrett were arrested early this morning at their home. They've been charged with assault in the 3rd degree, which is a Class C felony in Oregon given your age and the severity of the injuries." I closed my eyes. Despite everything, hearing it stated so officially made my stomach churn. "Garrett was also charged with criminal mischief for the damage to your property," Malcolm continued. "They were arraigned this morning. Garrett made bail. It was set at $25,000. Jolene's was set at $15,000. They're both out now." "So they're free?" Fear crept into my voice. "They're under strict conditions. They've been ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from you and your property. A temporary restraining order is in place. If they violate it, they'll be immediately rearrested. But Judith, I need you to be careful. We don't know how they'll react to this." After we hung up, I got out of bed slowly, every movement a reminder of what had happened. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. The stitches on my temple were stark and black against my pale skin. Purple bruises mottled my arms. My left eye was swollen and discolored. I looked like a victim. I looked away from the mirror. My phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom?" Jolene's voice was sharp, angry. "What the hell did you do? We were arrested. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to Garrett's career? To our reputation?" I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my daughter rage at me for reporting the crime she'd helped commit. "You couldn't just let it go," she continued, her voice rising. "You had to be dramatic and call the police like we're criminals. We're your family. This is how you treat family. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. A family doesn't throw their mother through a glass door, I said quietly. Family doesn't steal money using forged documents. Family doesn't stand there and watch her bleed and then walk away. We didn't steal. $150,000. I interrupted. A home equity line of credit I never knowingly signed for. My lawyer found it. Did you think I wouldn't notice eventually? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. That was a legitimate loan, Jolene finally said, but her voice had changed, become guarded. You signed the papers. Garrett told me I was signing a gift acknowledgement. That's not our problem if you didn't read what you were signing. That's on you, Mom. You're always so careless with important things. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed it for a moment, almost questioned my own memory. But then I thought of Malcolm's face when he showed me those forged signatures, and I knew, a judge will decide what happened, I said. Malcolm is filing a lawsuit to void the fraudulent loan and recover the money you stole. You're suing us. Jolene's voice hit a note of disbelief. Your own daughter? This is insane. You're being vindictive and crazy. Is this about the money we asked for? Because we didn't actually mean $200,000. I'm going to hang up now, I said. Don't call me again. If you do this, we're done. You understand that? You'll never see me again. You'll die alone in that house without family. I ended the call and blocked the number. My hands were shaking, but I felt clear-headed in a way I hadn't in years. The house was quiet around me. Too quiet. For the first time, I noticed how empty it felt. Robert had been gone for 5 years, but his absence had never felt as profound as it did now. He would have known what to do. He would have protected me from this. Or maybe, I thought, he tried to. Maybe he saw something in Garrett that I refused to see. Maybe his concern about Jolene's relationship had been more than just a father's overprotectiveness. I thought about our last argument, just days before his heart attack. We'd been in this kitchen. Robert had been adamant that we needed to update our wills to include protections for our assets. And something's not right about him, Robert had said, meaning Garrett. The way he looks at things, the questions he asks about what we're worth. Jolene's changed since she's been with him. You're being paranoid, I'd argued. She's in love. She's happy. Is she, or is she just different? I'd dismissed his concerns, accused him of not wanting to let our daughter grow up. Now I wondered if the stress of that argument, of his worries about Jolene, had contributed to his heart attack. The guilt of that thought was almost unbearable. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was from Garrett. You'll regret this, you old bitch. Nobody crosses me and gets away with it. I screenshotted the text and immediately sent it to Malcolm, then blocked that number too. Within minutes, Malcolm called back. I'm contacting the police. That's a direct violation of the restraining order and possibly a criminal threat. Stay inside, keep your doors locked, and I'm sending someone to install a security system today. Don't argue with me about the cost. I'm handling it. The security company arrived that afternoon. They installed cameras at every entrance, motion sensors, and a panic button system that would alert both the police and Malcolm's office if activated. The technician teaching me how to use it was patient, but I could see the pity in his eyes when he looked at my bruised face. These systems are really good, ma'am, he said gently. Nobody will get within 50 feet of your house without you knowing about it. After he left, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories of a life I thought I'd built solidly. A good marriage, a loving daughter, a peaceful retirement. Now I saw how fragile it had all been, how quickly it could be destroyed. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings and doctor's appointments. Malcolm filed the civil lawsuit to recover the fraudulent loan. The prosecutor handling the criminal case called to discuss my willingness to testify. My primary care physician documented my injuries for both the criminal and civil proceedings. Friends from my book club and church started calling. News traveled fast in our community, and everyone had heard about my accident. I corrected them gently. It wasn't an accident. I was assaulted by my daughter and son-in-law. The reactions varied. Some were shocked and supportive. Others became uncomfortable and made excuses to end the conversation. One woman, Patricia Hammond, whom I'd known for 15 years, actually said, "Well, family arguments do get heated sometimes. I'm sure you all said things you didn't mean." I stopped returning her calls after that, but there were bright spots. My nephew James called from Seattle, horrified by what had happened. He offered to come stay with me, and I was touched even though I declined. My friend Dorothy from book club came over with groceries and sat with me for hours, just keeping me company while I worked up the courage to clean the bloodstains from my kitchen floor. I always thought Jolene was cold, Dorothy admitted quietly as we scrubbed. Even when she was younger. Beautiful girl, but something missing behind the eyes. I never said anything because, well, who says that about someone's daughter? I realized how many people had probably seen things I'd been too close to notice, or too desperate to believe my family was perfect. A week after the assault, Malcolm called with an update on the fraud investigation. The documents were definitely forged, he said. Noon. The bank's fraud department compared the signatures to your actual signature on file. They're substantially different. Whoever forged them wasn't even trying very hard. The bank is cooperating fully and has agreed to void the loan. They're also pursuing criminal charges against whoever forged your signature. Will I get the money back? That's where it gets complicated. The money was transferred to Garrett and Jolene's personal account, and then used to pay down their mortgage and fund renovations. To recover it, we need to win the civil suit, which could take months or even years. And even then, if they don't have liquid assets to pay a judgment, we might have to force the sale of their house. Will it come to that? Possibly. They're fighting the lawsuit. Their attorney is claiming you verbally authorized the loan and just don't remember. They're going to try to paint you as elderly and confused. The words stung. I'm 72, not 90. I'm not confused. I know that, and will prove it. But Judith, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. They're going to attack your character, your memory, your competence. They'll try to make it seem like you're a bitter old woman trying to punish your daughter for some imagined slight. Let them try, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. I have the truth on my side. That night, I sat in my living room with all the lights off, watching the security camera feeds on the tablet the company had left me. I saw my quiet street, my overgrown garden, the patches of moss on my driveway I kept meaning to pressure wash. I saw my life from the outside, and it looked small, contained, limited. I thought about the woman I'd been at 40, at 50, at 60. I'd always been someone's something. Robert's wife, Jolene's mother, the church volunteer, the helpful neighbor. I'd shaped myself around other people's needs, other people's expectations. And now, at 72, with stitches in my head and bruises fading to yellow on my arms, I had a chance to figure out who Judith Winters was on her own. The thought was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. I picked up my phone and called Malcolm. Is everything okay? He answered immediately, concern in his voice. I need to ask you something, I said. That home equity line they took out. The bank is voiding it, right? Yes, within the next week or two. So the equity in my house is still mine. Entirely yours. Around $400,000, give or take. I took a deep breath. I want to take out a legitimate home equity line of credit. Not a lot, maybe $50,000. Can you help me do that properly? There was a pause. But may I ask what for? I'm going to remodel this house, I said, looking around at the worn furniture and faded walls. I'm going to fix everything I've been putting off because I was too worried about spending money. I'm going to make this place mine again. Really mine. I heard Malcolm smile through the phone. I'll set up a meeting with the bank for next week. Judith, I think that's an excellent idea. After we hung up, I walked through my house room by room, making mental notes. New paint throughout, refinished hardwood floors, updated kitchen appliances, a new back door, one that wasn't broken and boarded up, one that would let light pour in without carrying the memory of violence. I would rebuild this house the way I was rebuilding myself, from the ground up, with no more cracks for anyone to exploit. Chapter 4. The Rebuilding. The contractor, a sturdy woman named Meredith Brennan, who ran her own renovation company, walked through my house with a clipboard and an experienced eye. She paused at the boarded-up back door, then turned to me with curiosity, tempered by professional discretion. "Storm damage?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied. She nodded, not pressing further, and I appreciated that small mercy. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd grown tired of explaining what had happened. The curious stares at my fading bruises, the stitches that still pulled when I raised my eyebrows, the way conversations would halt when I entered the room at church. Meredith spent an hour measuring, noting, and photographing. When she finally sat down at my kitchen table with her estimates, she was straightforward in a way I found refreshing. "You're looking at about $45,000 for everything," she said, spreading out itemized lists. "New door and frame for the back, professional repair of the damaged wall, complete interior paint job, kitchen appliance upgrades, hardwood floor refinishing, and bathroom fixture replacements. I can have a crew here starting Monday if you approve." "Monday is perfect," I said without hesitation. She looked surprised. "Most people need time to think about this kind of investment. I've spent too much of my life thinking," I replied. "It's time to act." The renovation began on a crisp November morning. Meredith arrived with a crew of 4, 2 younger men, a woman about my age, and a college student working part-time. They were professional, efficient, and respectful of the fact that I was living in the house during the work. Having people in my home every day was an adjustment. For 5 years since Robert died, I'd grown accustomed to silence and solitude. Now there was the sound of sanders and hammers, the smell of fresh paint, the constant hum of activity. It was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. On the 3rd day of work, Meredith's older crew member, a woman named Pauline Vasquez, found me in the living room sorting through old photographs. "Mrs. Winters, we found something behind the old door frame you should see." She led me to where they'd removed the damaged door frame. There, stuffed into a gap in the wall, was a small bundle wrapped in plastic. With trembling hands, I unwrapped it. Inside was a stack of letters, maybe 20 of them, addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. They were unopened, dated from the months before he died. "We'll give you some privacy," Pauline said gently, ushering the crew out for an early lunch. I sat on the floor right there, still covered in sawdust from their work, and opened the first letter. It was dated 6 weeks before Robert's death. "My dearest Judith," it began. "I'm writing this because I don't know how to say these things out loud without hurting you. I'm worried about Jolene. I'm worried about this man she's planning to marry. And I'm worried about what will happen to you if I'm not here to protect you." My hands shook as I read further. Letter after letter, Robert had documented his concerns about Garrett. He'd noticed how Garrett asked questions about our finances, about the house, about Robert's retirement accounts. He'd observed how Jolene's personality had changed, how she'd become more materialistic, more cold. "I'm not being paranoid," one letter read. "I'm being observant. I see the way he calculates everything, weighs every interaction for what he can gain. I see how Jolene doesn't laugh anymore, doesn't have that spark she used to have. She's performing happiness, not living it." Robert had planned to talk to me about all of this. He'd been gathering evidence, preparing to suggest we see a family therapist together. He'd even drafted a new will with conditions on Jolene's inheritance. She would only receive it if she left Garrett, or if a forensic accountant verified she wasn't being financially manipulated. The last letter was dated 3 days before his heart attack. "Tomorrow, I'm telling you everything," he wrote. "I know it will upset you. I know you'll think I'm being unfair to Jolene, but I love you too much to stay silent. Whatever happens, remember that I'm trying to protect you. That's all I've ever wanted to do." But tomorrow had never come. The heart attack had struck him in the middle of the night, sudden and fatal. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. I sat there on my dusty floor, surrounded by letters from my dead husband, and cried. Not just for him, but for the warning I'd never received, for the protection he'd tried to give me that never materialized, for the 5 years I'd spent vulnerable and alone, while his final act of love remained hidden in a wall. When Meredith and her crew returned from lunch, I was still sitting there, tears drying on my face. "Bad news," Meredith asked gently. "Old news," I said. "Painful, but important." That night, I called Malcolm and read him excerpts from the letters. There was a long silence after I finished. "Judith, these could be relevant to the civil case," he said carefully. "They establish that Robert had concerns about Garrett's intentions even before you gave them any money. It shows a pattern. Use whatever you need," I said. "Robert was trying to protect me. I'm not going to let his efforts be wasted." The renovation progressed quickly. Each day, my house transformed a little more. The boarded-up door was replaced with a beautiful French door with frosted glass panels that let in light but protected my privacy. The damaged wall was repaired, the studs replaced, the drywall smoothed to perfection. Watching the physical wounds of my house heal gave me hope that my own wounds might heal too. But the legal battles continued. Jolene and Garrett's lawyer had filed a countersuit, claiming I owed them money for years of care and assistance. The list was absurd. They claimed they'd provided me with $200,000 worth of help since Robert died, including yard work, financial advice, and emotional support. It's completely fabricated, Malcolm explained during one of our regular phone calls. They can't provide any receipts, any evidence, any proof whatsoever. It's a nuisance suit designed to pressure you into dropping your legitimate claim. Will it work? Not if I have anything to say about it. The criminal case was moving forward too. A trial date had been set for February. The prosecutor was confident about conviction on at least some charges, but warned me that testifying would be difficult. And they're going to try to discredit you, she explained during a meeting at her office. They'll paint you as confused, forgetful, vindictive. They'll say you misremembered events or exaggerated what happened. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to tell the truth, I said, whatever that takes. As November turned to December, the house renovation neared completion. The hardwood floors gleamed with fresh polish. The walls were painted in warm, calming colors I'd chosen myself. Sage green in the living room, soft blue in the bedroom. The kitchen had new stainless steel appliances that worked efficiently instead of the 20-year-old models I'd been nursing along. One evening, Meredith did a final walkthrough with me, checking off items on her list. I have to say, Mrs. Winters, this house looks 20 years younger, she said with satisfaction. You should be proud. I looked around at the transformed space. Every room felt fresh, renewed, alive again. I am proud, I said. It's been a long time since I felt that way about something I accomplished. After she left, I walked through each room slowly, touching the smooth walls, admiring the clean lines and updated fixtures. This house had been my home for 43 years, but now it felt like mine in a way it never had before. Not mine and Robert's. Not the house where I raised Jolene. Not the place I was stuck while life happened around me. Just mine. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen, saw Malcolm's name, and answered. I have news, he said without preamble. Garrett's bank records just came through. The judge ordered full disclosure for the civil case. And they're broke, Judith, or nearly so. That house they bought for $1.9 million. They're underwater on the mortgage. Between their monthly payments, property taxes, and credit card debt, they're spending about $3,000 more than they make every month. Your $150,000 helped, but they're still drowning. I absorbed this information slowly, so when they demanded $200,000 from me, they were desperate, and they'd already spent the money they stole, so they couldn't give it back even if they wanted to, which they don't. Will I be able to recover any of it? Eventually, possibly. But it means forcing the sale of their house, and even then, after the mortgage is paid, there might not be much left. And Judith, he paused, they're not going to go down quietly. People this desperate, this cornered, can be dangerous. As if to punctuate his words, my new security system chimed. I looked at the tablet and saw a car slow down in front of my house, then drive away. I couldn't see the driver's face clearly, but something about the way the car lingered made my skin prickle. Malcolm, someone just drove by slowly. Could that be? I'm sending the police right now. Stay inside, arm the security system fully, and keep your phone with you. 2 police cars arrived within minutes. They searched the neighborhood but found nothing. Still, they filed a report and promised to increase patrols in my area. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. The house I just made beautiful suddenly felt vulnerable, exposed. The next morning, Dorothy came over with coffee and pastries. I heard about the car last night, she said, settling into my newly refinished kitchen. How are you holding up? I'm tired, I admitted. Tired of being afraid. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of this legal battle that seems like it will never end. Why don't you sell? She asked gently. Get away from all this. Start fresh somewhere else. I'd considered this option multiple times. Malcolm had suggested it too. A fresh start in a new city, maybe closer to James in Seattle, where I could leave all this pain behind. But every time I thought about it seriously, something in me rebelled. They want me gone, I said finally. They want me scared enough to run. And if I do, they win. They pushed me through a glass door, stole my money, and get to live in their fancy house while I rebuild my life somewhere else. No, I'm staying. Dorothy squeezed my hand. Then we're staying with you. You're not facing this alone. Over the next few weeks, Dorothy and several friends from church formed an informal support network. Someone checked on me every day, either in person or by phone. They accompanied me to court hearings, sat with me during difficult phone calls with Malcolm, and helped me maintain a sense of normalcy. Christmas approached, and I dreaded it. For 49 years, Christmas had meant family. Now, my only child was facing criminal charges for assaulting me. The irony was bitter. James called and invited me to Seattle for the holidays, but I declined. I couldn't leave my house, not with the court case ongoing and the security concerns. Then I'm coming there, he said firmly. He arrived on December 23rd with his partner, Marcus, both carrying bags of groceries and presents. They filled my house with laughter and conversation, helping me cook a Christmas dinner that felt warm and full, despite Jolene's absence. On Christmas Eve, as we sat around my living room admiring the small tree James had insisted on buying, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but James encouraged me. Maybe it's someone from church, he said. I answered. Immediately, I heard Jolene's voice, slurred and emotional. Merry Christmas, Mom, she said, the words dripping with sarcasm. Are you happy now? We're losing everything. The bank is foreclosing on our house. Garrett's firm is putting him on suspension because of the criminal charges. My friends won't talk to me. This is what you wanted, right? To destroy my life. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and maternal instinct. Part of me wanted to apologize, to fix things, to make it all better. But then I remembered the broken glass, the blood, the coldness in her eyes as she walked away. I wanted you to love me, I said quietly. I wanted you to be the daughter I raised, the kind girl who used to braid my hair and tell me stories. I wanted you to see me as more than a source of money. That's what I wanted, Jolene. And I never got it. You're destroying me over nothing. You destroyed yourself, I interrupted. I just stopped letting you destroy me too. That's not the same thing. I hung up and blocked that number too. James hugged me while I cried. Marcus made tea. We sat together in my renewed, protected home, and I realized that family wasn't always blood. Sometimes family was the people who showed up when everyone else walked away. Chapter 5. The trial February arrived cold and gray. The trial was set to begin on the 15th, and as the date approached, I felt increasingly anxious. Malcolm had prepared me as best he could, conducting practice sessions where he played the role of the defense attorney, asking harsh questions designed to shake my testimony. Remember, he told me during our final preparation meeting, they're going to make you seem confused, vindictive, possibly senile. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate unless necessary. And Judith, he looked at me seriously, if you need a break, take one. There's no shame in admitting this is difficult. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my renovated bedroom, thinking about how I would face my daughter in court, how I would sit on a witness stand and recount the worst moment of my life while she sat at the defense table, watching me. At 4 a.m, I gave up on sleep. I made coffee, sat in my kitchen, and watched the winter dawn break slowly over Portland. The new French door let in soft morning light, and I thought about how far I'd come since that terrible October night. I'd survived. I'd protected myself. I'd rebuilt. Now I needed to testify. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and authority and echoing footsteps. Malcolm met me at the entrance along with Dorothy, who'd insisted on coming for moral support. James had flown down from Seattle again, and he waited in the hallway with Marcus, both of them giving me encouraging smiles. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected from television shows. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Stephanie Carruthers, had a no-nonsense demeanor that I found oddly comforting. The prosecutor, Andrea Song, gave me a reassuring nod as I entered, and then I saw them. Jolene sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back, looking younger and more vulnerable than her 43 years. Garrett sat beside her in an expensive gray suit, his expression calm and confident. Their attorney, a man named Derek Paulson, was reviewing documents with the intensity of someone preparing for battle. Jolene's eyes met mine for just a moment. I searched her face for remorse, for acknowledgement, for any sign of the daughter I remembered. But her expression was hard, closed off, almost contemptuous. I looked away first, feeling something inside me break and then, surprisingly, heal stronger than before. The jury selection had happened the previous week. Now, 12 strangers who would decide my daughter's fate filed into the jury box. I studied their faces, an elderly man who reminded me of Robert, a young mother bouncing a baby on her hip, a middle-aged businessman, a tattooed woman in her 30s, ordinary people being asked to judge an extraordinary situation. The prosecutor began with opening statements, laying out the case methodically. She described the dinner, the demand for money, the assault, the broken glass. She showed photographs of my injuries, my bloodied face, the bruises, the stitches. Several jurors looked uncomfortable. Then Derek Paulson stood for the defense's opening statement. "This is a tragedy," he began, his voice smooth and sympathetic. "A tragedy of misunderstanding between a mother and daughter, complicated by the mother's declining mental faculties and her inability to accept her daughter's normal adult independence." I tensed at the words declining mental faculties. He continued, painting a picture of me as an overbearing mother who'd never accepted Jolene's marriage, who constantly demanded attention and financial support from my daughter, who'd become increasingly confused and difficult as I aged. "On the night in question," he said, "Judith Winters became agitated when her daughter and son-in-law couldn't give her the money she was demanding. In her confusion and anger, she struck out at them. When Mrs. Winters fell and hit the glass door, it was a tragic accident during a difficult family confrontation, not an assault. An accident. It was a complete fabrication, but he told it with such confidence that I found myself wondering if some of the jurors might believe it. The prosecution called its first witness, one of the police officers who'd responded to my 911 call that night. He described the scene, the broken glass, my bloodied condition, my coherent statement given at 3 a.m. "In your professional opinion, Officer Chen, did Mrs. Winters appear confused or mentally impaired?" Andrea Song asked. "No, ma'am. She was clear, detailed, and consistent in her account of what happened. She knew the date, her address, and provided specific information about the assault. There were no signs of confusion or impairment." The defense attorney cross-examined, trying to suggest that my clarity might have been an act, or that I might have been coached. Officer Chen held firm. The second witness was the emergency room doctor who'd treated me. He testified about the severity of my injuries, the deep laceration requiring 12 stitches, the bruised ribs, the mild concussion. "Were these injuries consistent with someone simply falling?" Andrea asked. "No," the doctor said firmly. "The pattern of injuries suggested someone being pushed with significant force into a hard object. The bruising on her upper arms was particularly telling. It was consistent with being grabbed forcefully." During cross-examination, Derek tried to suggest I might have had a stroke or seizure that caused me to fall. The doctor demolished this theory with medical evidence and the results of my neurological exam. Then came the hardest part. Andrea Song called me to the stand. I walked to the witness box on trembling legs, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. I sat down, looked at the faces of the jury, and took a deep breath. Andrea began gently, establishing my background, my 44-year marriage to Robert, my career as a school librarian, my daughter Jolene's upbringing, the comfortable but modest life we'd built. Then she moved to that October night. "Mrs. Winters, can you tell the court what happened on October 14th? I told my story, every detail, every word, every moment of that terrible evening. I described cooking dinner with arthritic hands because I wanted my daughter to feel welcomed. I described Garrett's contempt and Jolene's coldness. I described the demand for $200,000 and my explanation that I didn't have it." "Yeah, what happened when you refused?" Andrea asked. "Garrett called me useless, broke. He said I was a burden and that I had nothing to contribute to anyone's life. Jolene grabbed my arm and pulled me backward. Then Garrett pushed me, hard, in the chest. My voice remained steady. I flew backward into the glass door. It shattered. I fell onto the broken glass and hit my head on the frame. "What did your daughter and Mr. Frost do after you fell?" They stood there, watching me bleed. Then Garrett told me to clean myself up and that I looked pathetic. Jolene took her purse and said I should call them when I was ready to be reasonable. They left through the front door. They left it open behind them. I could see several jurors leaning forward, riveted by the testimony. How long did you sit there before calling for help? I don't know exactly. Long enough for my kitchen floor to become very cold. Long enough to realize that my own daughter had walked away while I bled. Andrea showed the jury photographs of the scene. The blood on the floor, the shattered door, the broken china. Then she showed my medical photos again. Mrs. Winters, did you file a police report and press charges because you were confused or vindictive? No, I said clearly. And I filed a report because what happened to me was wrong, because I deserved to be safe in my own home, and because I finally understood that protecting someone else's reputation is not more important than protecting myself. When Andrea finished, I braced myself for cross-examination. Derek Paulson approached with a kind smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Winters, you're 72 years old, correct? Yes. And you live alone? Yes. Do you take any medications? I listed them. Blood pressure medication, something for my arthritis, a vitamin supplement. Do any of these medications affect memory or cognition? No. My doctor can confirm that. He switched tactics. You said earlier that you and Jolene used to be close. When did that change? After she married Garrett. Isn't it possible that you simply don't approve of your daughter's choice of husband, and this has colored your perception of events? My perception is that they pushed me through a glass door, I said evenly. That's not a matter of approval or disapproval. It's a matter of fact. You mentioned they asked for money, $200,000. Isn't it true that you've given them money before? Yes, $40,000 over the years, $30,000 for a wedding, $10,000 they said was for a down payment. So you have a history of financially supporting your daughter. I have a history of being a mother who helped when asked. And on this night, when they asked again, you refused. That must have made you angry. I wasn't angry. I was sad that they saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Derek paced in front of the jury box. Mrs. Winters, isn't it true that you've sued my clients for $150,000 in civil court? Yes, to recover money they stole using forged documents. Allegedly stole. Allegedly forged. He emphasized the words. Isn't it possible you signed those documents willingly and simply don't remember? No. I never knowingly authorized a home equity line of credit on my house. But you did sign papers that day, correct? I signed what Garrett told me was a gift acknowledgement form. So you admit you signed documents without reading them carefully? I felt the trap, but had no choice but to answer truthfully. I trusted him. Exactly. You trusted him. You signed documents. And now, possibly confused about what you agreed to, you're claiming fraud. He turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, is this malicious fraud? Or is this an elderly woman who made a mistake and can't accept responsibility? Objection, Andrea called. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Carruthers said. Mr. Paulson, please confine yourself to questions. He continued for another 20 minutes, trying to poke holes in my story, suggesting I was vindictive, confused, or simply mistaken, but I held firm. I answered every question honestly, maintained my composure, and repeated the truth over and over. When he finally dismissed me, I felt exhausted but unbowed. The trial continued for 3 more days. The prosecution called Malcolm, who testified about the forged documents. They called the bank's fraud investigator, who confirmed the signatures were fake. They called my doctor, who testified that I had no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Then the defense called Jolene. She took the stand in her navy suit, looking small and frightened. Derek Paulson led her through a carefully constructed narrative where I was the aggressor, demanding, unreasonable, increasingly erratic. According to Jolene, I'd become obsessed with money since Robert died, constantly asking them for financial support while simultaneously accusing them of trying to steal from me. I loved my mother, Jolene said, tears streaming down her face. I still do. But living with her paranoia and accusations became impossible. That night, she demanded we give her $200,000. When we explained we couldn't, she flew into a rage. She threw plates, screamed at us, lunged at Garrett. I tried to pull her back to calm her down, and she fell. It was an accident, a terrible accident. I watched her perform, and it was a performance. I could see that clearly now, and felt nothing but sadness. This stranger wearing my daughter's face, telling lies to a jury, was someone I no longer recognized. During cross-examination, Andrea's song was relentless. "Ms. Frost, you said you loved your mother. How many times did you visit her in the hospital after this accident?" We weren't allowed. There was a restraining order. The restraining order was issued the day after the incident. The incident occurred at 9:47 p.m. on October 14th. You were arrested the morning of October 15th. Your mother was in the hospital from the early hours of October 15th until late afternoon. You were released on bail that same afternoon. Why didn't you go see her? Jolene stammered. I didn't think. We were dealing with the arrest. So you were more concerned with your arrest than your mother's injuries. That's not what I meant. You testified that you tried to pull your mother back and she fell. Where did you grab her? Her arm, I think. Andrea displayed the photos of my injuries. These bruises on both upper arms. Multiple finger-shaped bruises. Does that look like someone gently pulling someone back, or someone grabbing them forcefully? I don't know. You also testified that your mother became erratic and paranoid after your father died. Yet Officer Chen testified that she was completely coherent and detailed in her statement at 3 a.m. Her doctor testified she has no cognitive impairment. Her attorney testified she successfully managed complex financial decisions. Does that sound like someone erratic and paranoid? She was good at hiding it. Or perhaps she wasn't erratic at all, and you're lying to avoid criminal responsibility. Objection, Derek shouted. Withdrawn, Andrea said smoothly. But the point was made. Garrett took the stand next, confident and composed. He backed up every lie Jolene had told, adding his own embellishments. According to him, I was a manipulative woman who resented his marriage to Jolene and had spent 5 years trying to sabotage their relationship. But under Andrea's cross-examination, cracks appeared. He got defensive, argumentative. When confronted with the evidence of the forged loan documents, he became hostile, nearly shouting at the prosecutor. Judge Carruthers called a recess, and when we returned, Garrett was noticeably subdued. The closing arguments happened on a Friday afternoon. Andrea Song methodically laid out the evidence, the injuries, the witnesses, the broken glass, the lack of any credible alternative explanation. This isn't a complicated case, she told the jury. An elderly woman refused to give money to her daughter and son-in-law. They became angry. They became violent. They pushed her through a glass door and left her bleeding on her kitchen floor. Everything else is noise designed to distract you from that simple truth. Derek Paulson's closing argument focused on reasonable doubt, on the possibility of misunderstanding, on the tragedy of a family torn apart by miscommunication and age-related confusion. The jury began deliberations late Friday afternoon. Malcolm, James, and I waited in a small conference room, not talking much, just existing in the suspended animation of waiting. The jury returned after 3 hours. We filed back into the courtroom. I couldn't look at Jolene as the judge asked the jury foreman for the verdict. On the charge of assault in the 3rd degree against Jolene Frost. How do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of assault in the 3rd degree against Garrett Frost. How do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of criminal mischief against Garrett Frost. How do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. I heard a sound from the defense table. Jolene sobbing. Part of me wanted to go to her, to comfort her as I had throughout her childhood. But I stayed seated, Malcolm's hand on my shoulder, and let the verdict stand. Sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. The judge revoked their bail, and they were immediately taken into custody. As the bailiffs led them away, Jolene looked back at me. Our eyes met for just a moment. This time, I saw something different in her expression. Not hatred, not contempt, fear. Outside the courthouse, James hugged me tightly. Dorothy and Marcus were there too, along with several friends from church. Someone had brought flowers. Everyone was congratulating me, telling me I was brave, telling me justice had been served. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. My daughter was going to prison. That was justice. Yes, that was accountability. That was protection for me, and for any future victims of her and Garrett's violence. But she was still my daughter, and some part of me, no matter how small, would always mourn the little girl who'd once crawled into my lap and asked me to read her one more story. Malcolm walked me to his car. The civil case should be easier now, he said. A criminal conviction makes the burden of proof much simpler. We'll get your money back, Judith. Maybe not all of it, but most of it. I know, I said. Thank you. How are you doing? Really? I thought about that question carefully. I'm sad, I said finally. But I'm also free. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Malcolm said softly. That night, alone in my renovated house, I stood by the new French door and looked out at my frost-covered garden. February's cold had settled in deep, but spring would come eventually. It always did. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Passive, accommodating, desperate to be loved even when that love was one-sided and poisonous. I thought about the woman I was now. Scarred, yes, but standing. Alone, yes, but not lonely. Free, finally, to define myself on my own terms. The price had been high, but freedom always was.